Ukraine breaks into the EU. The date has already been named. Documents are on the table. Meanwhile, Russia is hit by an icy vortex. A monster snow cyclone has driven the residents of the capital into panic. Streets buried, cars frozen, the capital paralyzed. A new wave of powerful weapons for Ukraine. The United States is loading Tomahawks. France is delivering super drones capable of destroying the Russian army. A terrifying fist of retaliation from Ukraine's armed forces slams into the enemy. There has never been revenge like this for Kyiv. The Kremlin has erupted in screams. But while the country falls apart from the inside, Putin is running a shadow smuggling network through Europe. Sanctioned goods and secret routes straight from the heart of Germany. And no real peace talks. The Kremlin is delaying, rearming and preparing new, more brutal strikes. Let's break down what's happening right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Ukraine finally enters the EU. A date has been named. Ukraine may finally be on the brink of joining the European Union, and much sooner than expected. An accelerated EU accession for Ukraine could become part of the broader plan to end the war and may take place as early as January 1st, 2027. This was stated by Alexander Vučić. According to the Serbian president, these are not isolated talks limited to Ukraine and Russia, but wide-ranging international agreements involving a large part of the global community. Vučić emphasized that the information he received comes from reliable sources.
I will tell you something I heard somewhere, and I would not be saying this if I were not confident it was true. Part of the peace plan, if it is implemented between Russia and Ukraine, will involve not just one side, but a significant part of the international community. One element of this plan is that Ukraine will become a member of the European Union on January 1st, 2027. Effectively tomorrow.
Vučić also added that Ukraine's accession to the EU is being considered one of the key conditions for ending hostilities and implementing a peace scenario. The same position is shared by Volodymyr Zelensky. Zelensky stated that it is critically important for Ukraine to formally include a concrete EU accession date in the agreement ending the war in order to obtain clear security guarantees and prevent any future blocking of Ukraine's membership.
The second security guarantees for Ukraine are European security guarantees, the coalition of the willing, and most importantly, membership in the European Union. These are economic security guarantees for Ukraine. From our perspective, the country will be fully technically ready for accession in 2027. We want a specific date written into our agreement on ending the war, so that all parties adhere to these arrangements, including the aggressor, and so that no one blocks us again afterward.
Zelensky also noted that bilateral agreements with the United States currently serve as the primary security guarantees for Ukraine. According to him, the relevant document is 100% ready.
We are expecting readiness from our partners, dates and a location for when we will sign it. After that, the document will go for ratification in the United States Congress and in the Ukrainian Parliament, in accordance with our agreements.
Moscowites are starting their mornings with cardio, armed with shovels. In just 2 days, more than half of Moscow's monthly snowfall norm is expected to fall. Authorities have declared an orange weather danger level in the capital. Roads and cars are buried under snow, highways are hit by heavy drifting, and visibility has dropped to a minimum. At Moscow airports, flights have been delayed. This is shaping up to be the most powerful blizzard of the season. Forecasters expect 14 to 19 millimeters of precipitation and an additional 10 to 15 centimeters of snow. There is, however, a brief silver lining. Temperatures will rise from minus 18 degrees Celsius to around minus 8 degrees Celsius. But the relief will be short-lived. The deep freeze will return after the storm. The legendary Tomahawk missiles for Ukraine are already being quietly loaded. This decision has the potential to turn the rules of the game upside down, right in the middle of the negotiation process. Former advisor to the Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Dan Rice, has held talks with U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth regarding this initiative. The discussion centers on missiles with a range of up to 4,000 kilometers, a capability that could radically alter the balance of power. Russia's deep rare areas would become vulnerable, while the Kremlin would come under unprecedented pressure, forced to seek concessions.
In November 2023, Ukraine first launched ATACMS missiles and destroyed 24 Russian Kyiv-52 attack helicopters. Moscow immediately withdrew all its helicopters from Crimea and rewrote its combat plans. A few Tomahawk missiles will do the same thing, Rice said. The range is so great that Russia simply cannot protect all of its critical assets.
And now another decisive statement. Ukraine should no longer be asking for these missiles. Instead, Europe, the US Senate and major media outlets must be demanding that Tomahawks be provided to Kyiv.
And Tomahawks in Ukrainian hands would actually prove only one thing: There is no alternative to peace.
France unleashes a new decisive weapon for Ukraine. France has delivered a new long-range drone weapon. The Ukrainian armed forces have received Radar 330 French-made drones, a major step forward in strengthening long-range strike and reconnaissance capabilities on the battlefield. The Radar 330 was designed as a multi-role platform capable of both intelligence gathering and direct strike missions. According to Jean-Marc Giuliani, president of EOS Technology, the drone is able to operate autonomously and fully meets the demands of today's battlefield, where speed, range, and survivability are decisive. This is not a disposable drone. It is a system built for endurance, adaptability, and independent decision-making in contested airspace. The drone's maximum operational range reaches up to 500 kilometers with an endurance of up to 5 hours. During this time, Radar 330 can patrol designated zones, collect reconnaissance data, and, if required, strike targets on its own. Its warhead weighs around 4 kilograms, specifically designed to destroy armored vehicles. This sharply distinguishes Radar from lightweight FPV drones that dominate the front line but lack deep strike capability. One of the Radar 330's most critical features is its ability to operate without satellite navigation. Instead of GPS, the drone relies on an optical navigation system, allowing it to function even in conditions of intense electronic warfare where satellite signals are jammed or completely unavailable. In a battlefield saturated with jammers, this capability turns Radar 330 into a persistent, hard-to-kill threat. There has never been revenge like this for Kyiv. Ukraine's armed forces have unleashed weapons of retaliation. Belgorod was plunged into icy darkness as the region endured the most powerful airstrike of the entire full-scale war. It was not a random escalation, it was a mirror response. No barbaric shelling of Ukrainian cities goes unanswered. Every strike is returned decisively and relentlessly. By choosing this path, Vladimir Putin has effectively passed judgment on his own people, dragging them into the consequences of his war. All the shocking details, watch right now.
Blackout is slowly but surely spreading across the territory of the Russian Federation. Following Belgorod, Taganrog and Perm were also left without electricity, water, and heating.
So basically, nothing has changed. That is, the area is disconnected.
Judging by information in Russian public channels, Belgorod was the first to come under a massive strike. On Saturday, after 9 p.m., the city was attacked nearly 100 times, and local residents counted up to 50 powerful explosions.
Ukrainian forces tore Belgorod's power system to shreds, once again leaving tens and hundreds of thousands of people without electricity and heat, which will be a disaster for the local population given the current 15-degree frosts. Kyiv has unleashed holy vengeance for energy terror on this region of Russia, where hordes of occupiers are based, and from where they launched their raids on the Kharkiv region.
The attack was so effective that the Russian authorities had to hastily invent yet another set of tall tales to somehow justify the scale of the destruction and the inability of Russian air defenses to counter Ukrainian drones. As a result, the region's governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov, spun a story claiming that the shelling was carried out by HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems. It was supposedly its debris that local residents found near the explosion sites.
Guys, good in the city was just shelled 3 times. I'm just pulling up to my house and here's this chunk lying here.
However, the object that Kremlin propaganda is passing off as a HIMARS fragment doesn't stand up to any scrutiny.
This is clearly not a HIMARS fragment because, you see, it's a rather large metal piece and it's flat. But usually when we see pieces of a missile, they're generally curved. If it's like the casing, there might be, I don't know, tubes or microchips if it's the internal part of the missile. That's why I strongly suspect that the metal thing the eyewitness showed most likely doesn't belong to any kind of weapon.
So it turns out that Putin's much-praised Russian air defense can't even handle ordinary Ukrainian drones anymore. After the latest attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces on the Russian capital, the Kremlin is pulling more and more forces toward Moscow, analysts explain, effectively leaving the regions without air defense. The air defense systems that remain, due to Ukrainian blackouts, are operating with major disruptions.
Russian air defense simply doesn't have time to respond. And, as is well known, it has been significantly deprived of power and greatly reduced after numerous waves of strikes on these very air defense systems in various regions.
But instead of patching up the holes in its air defense, the Russian command is taking a much simpler approach. It orders all information about strikes on Belgorod and elsewhere to be concealed.
However, this doesn't just apply to Belgorod. The fact is that since yesterday and throughout last night, power outages have occurred not only in the Belgorod region, but also in other Russian regions. Under the pretext of scheduled maintenance or brief incidents, the Kremlin authorities are trying to conceal the true extent of the destruction and avoid panic.
But how can a nationwide panic be avoided when a blackout, personally provoked by Putin in the war he started, is spreading across the country at an unprecedented speed? The list of cities and regions currently without electricity and heat includes Murmansk, Severomorsk, Zakumsk, Oryol, Taganrog, Rostov region, Podolsk, Zaraysk, Khimki, Sukovsky, and Elektrostal.
The Russian capital of Moscow can no longer manage or withstand the devastating repercussions of the prolonged aerial warfare campaign it started itself.
Despite mounting problems inside Russia, the Kremlin is not ready for real negotiations to end the war and is deliberately stalling for time. This assessment was voiced by a senator official from Russia's foreign intelligence apparatus, describing the current state of talks on ending Russia's war against Ukraine. At the same time, Russia is ramping up its military-industrial capacity, signaling that Moscow is preparing not for peace, but for a prolonged confrontation. So what exactly is Russia doing to drag the war out, and is it preparing to intensify its attack on Ukraine? The answer is coming up next.
Do Russians want war? The Kremlin is not ready for real negotiations to end the war. This was reported by Ukrainian intelligence. According to Oleg Lugovsky, first deputy head of the Forward Intelligence Service of Ukraine, Moscow is currently betting not on dialogue, but on buying time. The Kremlin is counting on an offensive at the front and energy terror with blackouts to break the Ukrainians and impose its own terms.
The energy system itself is Putin's target. His goal is Ukrainian society, which he wants to pressure into forcing the Ukrainian authorities to capitulate.
A representative of Ukrainian intelligence also commented on the so-called red lines of the Kremlin in negotiations. According to him, Russia has several of these, and they are adjusted from time to time. Among the key demands are that Ukraine does not join security alliances and that there are no foreign troops on its territory. At the same time, Lugovskoy emphasized that Moscow can formulate new red lines at any moment to drag out the negotiation process.
Russia is ready for negotiations. Russia wants negotiations about Ukraine's capitulation. Russia is ready to negotiate Ukraine's capitulation. The United States, to be precise. The Trump administration is ready for peace talks. They're not interested in the terms of peace at all. They are interested in a ceasefire. Russia is interested in the end of Ukraine, its existence, Ukraine's capitulation. We are interested in a just peace.
There are other facts that show Russia is actually not interested in peace. The Kremlin is ramping up military production to continue terrorizing Ukrainian cities. In particular, Russia has started using a new high-speed drone model, the Garin 5, against Ukraine. At the same time, the key components for these jet-powered drones, according to Ukrainian intelligence, these are supplied by Chinese and Western companies. This was reported by the British publication The Guardian. Since the beginning of this year, 2 such drones have been shot down, one near Kyiv and the other near Dnipro. The Garin 5 has a flight range of just under 1,000 kilometers and can carry a payload of 90 kilograms. It is believed that Russia hopes to further extend the weapon's range by launching it from a manned jet aircraft.
Russia wants to crush Ukraine, destroy it as a state. That is Putin's goal. He is ready to achieve it by military means or by any other means. If it can be achieved through diplomatic means, especially with the automatic lifting of sanctions on Russia, that's just a bonus. And we see this, Europeans see it, America sees it too. But everyone has different goals. Our task is to survive. The Europeans' task is to maintain stability on the European continent and prevent a threat from the East, a Russian threat from the East. Trump's task: to put another checkmark for himself. I stopped another war, ideally making good money from it. More precisely, not just ideally, but necessarily, making good money from it is a must.
In his speech at the World Economic Forum in Davos this week, President Zelensky stated that Russia appears to be producing more drones, up to 500 a day, and ballistic missiles than it is using for attacks. According to a report prepared this week by the Institute for Science and International Security, Moscow appears to be focusing on technological developments to overcome Ukrainian air defenses. Currently,
there is an increase in the number of drones of that Shahid type equipped with video cameras, online and radio modems compared to the total number of such UAVs. Implementing such upgrades requires the use of specialized equipment and the presence of operators who have undergone the necessary training.
Among other innovations reported this year by Ukrainian intelligence are Garand 2 drones, which are allegedly being equipped with man-portable air defense missiles to target Ukrainian aircraft. That attempt to intercept them. All of this points to one thing: Russia has no intention of stopping the war. On the contrary, it is doing everything it can to intensify and escalate its attacks.
And now just listen to this. Sanctioned goods are freely reaching Moscow from EU territory. Yes, you heard that right. Journalists have uncovered the Putin-linked shadow mail network operating in the very heart of Germany. Despite sanctions and controls, this covered logistics channel continues to function, quietly funneling restricted goods straight into Russia. How does this system work? Who is behind it? And why has it gone unnoticed for so long? All the details in our report.
Despite strict sanctions, banned goods are easily making their way from Germany to Russia. This was reported by Bild. After their months-long investigation, journalists uncovered a likely parcel smuggling network operating in the very heart of Germany. To uncover Putin's shadow mail network, journalists used GPS trackers to trace the route of parcels sent through a network linked to former employees of a Russian post subsidiary in Germany. But let's take it step by step. Bild discovered that a key role in the scheme is played by a logistics company registered at the end of 2022. Officially, it only has a mailbox in Cologne, but in reality, parcels are brought to a warehouse near Berlin, from where trucks head to Russia via Poland and Belarus.
Journalists from Bild use GPS trackers to trace the route of parcels sent through a network connected to former employees of a Russian post subsidiary in Germany. We're talking about hundreds of tons of shipments that are regularly sent to Moscow.
The journalists sent 5 test parcels containing unusable sanctioned electronic components, which were declared as harmless items. The contents of the parcels were listed as books, scarves, and hats. The shipping cost is €26 for a package weighing up to 2 kilograms.
Special attention was drawn to the use of documents from Uzbekistan Post when sending the cargo, even though it officially does not have the right to operate in Germany. The German authorities are already investigating possible violations of the law.
As journalists discovered, the route of the parcels is always the same: Berlin, Poland, Belarus, Moscow. Packages with hidden tracking devices crossed the EU borders near Belarusian Brest almost without any obstacles. All the GPS devices eventually reported the same result: the arrival in Moscow. In response to a request from Bild, the logistics company stated that their control mechanisms are designed in such a way that violating EU sanctions is virtually impossible, but they added that they are not protected against false statements. Additionally, the Bild investigation reports that a car belonging to Dmitry V, the former managing director of Ruspost GmbH, is regularly parked behind the company's warehouse. In 2014, Russian Post tasked him with establishing a subsidiary in Berlin. And although he officially resigned after the start of the full-scale invasion, the Bild investigation confirms that he is currently running this logistics company that ships cargo to Russia.
The existence of certain channels through which sanctioned goods from the European Union end up in Russia is not really news to anyone. Unfortunately, Ukraine regularly receives evidence confirming this after every shelling of its territory. When Ukrainian specialists examine the debris of missiles and drones, they invariably find a large number of components from the European Union. In other words, despite all the restrictions, as practice shows, the Russians are able to obtain everything they need without much trouble or effort.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly stated that the Russian military-industrial complex is critically dependent on the import of foreign components, without which the production of missiles and drones is virtually impossible. According to him, this is not about individual types of weapons, but about the entire system of Russian weapons production, which relies on components that Russia is unable to manufacture on its own.
Russian missiles are produced only because there are schemes to circumvent sanctions. That is true. Everyone can see how Russia is now trying to drive Ukrainians, our people, into a cold death with outdoor temperatures at minus 20 degrees Celsius. But the Russians would not be able to make a single ballistic or cruise missile without critical components from other countries. And it's not just China. Russia receives components from companies in Europe, the United States, and Taiwan.
During one of his recent speeches at the Davos Forum, where he emphasized that, in fact, the sanctions mechanisms are being circumvented, Russia is getting everything it needs, and this is a very big problem. Theoretically, the sanctions mechanism was supposed to deprive Russia of the means to continue the war, and thus push it toward ending this very war.
But in reality, things turned out to be quite different. Sanctions against Russia are absolutely not working as they were supposed to.
In reality, Russia continues to trade oil, continues to earn money, and with that money, it calmly buys everything it needs in a number of countries that have formally declared sanctions against Russia. And in this way, the whole system functions, and as a result, Russia is able to continue shelling Ukraine, destroying Ukrainian infrastructure, and creating a humanitarian catastrophe in Ukraine. And in fact, this is the price of it all. This is the price of the fact that no one in Europe is seriously dealing with sanctions.
Political analyst Petro Olszczuk explains why all of this is happening this way. And unfortunately, these reasons are obvious.
They don't deal with it for one simple reason, because trading with Russia is profitable for many representatives of European business. Well, that's exactly what they're doing, in fact.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.